My mom said I was just jealous of my perfect sister while they lived in the house I paid for. So I stopped the mortgage payments, and the foreclosure revealed the lies, debts, and secrets they'd hidden behind their smiles for years. I'm a 23-year-old male, and I need to get this off my chest because it's been eating me alive for years. My whole life, I've been the disappointment in my family. Not because I actually messed up, but because I chose a path my parents think is beneath them. I got into fixing stuff when I was a teenager, starting with small projects around the house, then helping neighbors with their decks and fences. By 18, I was working for a local contractor who taught me everything about woodworking and home repairs. 2 years later, I had enough skills and connections to start my own handyman business. Here's the thing, I'm actually making great money. Seriously good money. I've got regular clients who refer me to their friends, zero debt, a solid truck that's paid off, and enough savings to buy a small house if I wanted to. I charge $75 per hour for most jobs, and I'm booked solid weeks in advance. Do the math. But my parents act like I'm one step away from being homeless. My dad keeps sending me job listings for real careers, and my mom is always talking about night school options, like I'm some loser who can't figure out what to do with his life. Meanwhile, my sister Jess, a 26-year-old female, is the golden child who can do no wrong. She went to Cornell, got a fancy-sounding marketing job in the city, and supposedly lives this amazing Instagram life with her investment banker boyfriend. Every family dinner is the Jess show. And then they look at me with disappointed faces saying things like, "So built any nice birdhouses lately?" Like, what I do is some kind of joke. The crazy part? 2 years ago, I overheard my parents freaking out about money. Dad's company had cut his hours and they were behind on the mortgage. They were seriously worried about losing the house. The same house I grew up in where all our family memories are. I had the money to help them. I'd been saving basically everything I earned, but I knew they would never accept it from me because in their eyes, I'm just playing around with tools until I grow up and get a real job. So I did something kind of nuts. I figured out a way to set up automatic payments for their mortgage from my business account, making it look like it was coming from their retirement fund. For 2 years, I've been secretly paying their $1,750 monthly mortgage. That's over $40,000 of my unsuccessful career money keeping a roof over their heads while they praise Jess for sending them pictures of her business class flights. I never said anything because of pride, I guess, or hoped that they'd eventually notice I was doing okay, but they never did. Dad still introduces me as my son who's between careers. And Mom still sends me listings for apartments I could actually afford that are total dumps compared to where I could live if I wanted to. The worst is family gatherings. All my aunts and uncles asking Jess about her amazing life while I get the hanging in there. Questions like I'm struggling. My cousin literally asked me if I needed help finding a steady job last Christmas while I was in the middle of a $220,000 kitchen remodel for the mayor's house. Jess just eats it up. She's always been that way. Ever since we were kids, she got straight A's, was class president, the whole golden child package. I was always the other one. I've tried to show them I'm doing well in subtle ways. I bought a really nice watch. I take them out to dinner sometimes and pay without making a big deal about it. I got Mom a fancy spa package for a birthday, but they think I'm being irresponsible with my money. Like, I should be saving every penny for when my hobby doesn't work out anymore. The thing is, I'm not even mad about them favoring Jess. That's been my whole life. I'm used to it. What kills me is that they honestly think I'm some kind of loser when I'm literally keeping their house from being taken by the bank. And yeah, I know I should probably just tell them, but at this point, it would be this whole dramatic thing. And honestly, I don't have the energy for it. Also, it's not like Jess is a bad person or anything. We actually got along fine growing up. But a couple of months ago, I started noticing weird stuff with Jess. She's always been super consistent with her social media, posting about client meetings, office parties, weekend trips with her boyfriend, Tom, all that stuff. But suddenly, her posts got off. The first thing I noticed was she stopped tagging locations. She used to check in everywhere. Fancy restaurants, her office building, airport lounges. Then she was just posting photos with vague captions like lunch meeting with the team, but no details on where. Then I spotted something really weird. She posted a photo of her view from the office. A skyline shot that was supposed to be from their corporate headquarters, but I recognized it from a real estate website because I'd been looking at apartments in that area. It was literally a stock photo from a property listing. Around the same time her visits home got less frequent, when she did show up, she dodged questions about work. She used to brag nonstop about her clients and projects, but now she'd just say things were really busy or going great without any details and change the subject super fast. Her boyfriend Tom started acting weird too. They've been together for 3 years and he used to be this confident guy, always talking about investments and market stuff. Last time they visited he seemed stressed as hell. When Dad asked him about some stock tips, Tom got all awkward and said he wasn't really allowed to discuss that, which was weird because he'd never shut up about that stuff before. One time, I was grabbing a drink from the garage fridge and overheard them arguing behind the house. Tom was saying something like, "You can't keep doing this, it's getting out of control." And Jess was like, "Just give me a little more time." When they noticed me, they both went silent and fake smiled like nothing was happening. I started paying more attention after that, noticing other stuff too. Jess always forgot her wallet when we went out to eat every single time. Her supposedly brand new Audi was in the shop for 3 months straight. She kept using Mom's car when she visited. She used to show up with shopping bags from designer stores. Now, she was borrowing Mom's clothes and accessories. Whenever my parents asked her for help with even small stuff that cost money, she'd have some excuse about how her accounts were tied up in investments, or she was between payment cycles. Her Instagram still showed the fancy lifestyle, but I realized she was recycling a lot of old photos and just posting them with new captions. Same office party photo with different celebrating our new client posts months apart. I tried dropping hints to my parents that maybe things weren't all perfect in Jessland. Just casual stuff like, "Hey, have you noticed Jess seems stressed about work lately? Or isn't it weird her car's been in the shop so long?" Mom shut that down so fast, got all defensive and was like, "Not everyone wants to spend their life patching up broken cabinets like you. Real careers come with real stress, and real professionals don't spend months tinkering in a garage." Thanks, Mom. Great chat. Dad was a little better but still brushed it off with, "Your sister's in a high-pressure industry. She's doing important things, not just hammering nails." This from the guy whose hammering nails son is secretly paying his mortgage. Meanwhile, Jess kept feeding them stories about her big promotion coming up and how she was this close to landing some huge client that would be a game changer. They ate it up like always. The whole thing was making me feel crazy like, am I the only one seeing the red flags here? Am I just being jealous? I didn't want to believe my sister was lying about everything, but something definitely wasn't adding up. I decided to do some digging. Nothing stalkerish, just basic stuff. I looked up her company online to see if she was listed on their team page. She wasn't, which was weird because she'd supposedly been there for years and was up for a director position. I googled her boyfriend's investment firm too, found the company, but no Tom listed anywhere. I didn't know what to do with this information. Confront Jess? Tell my parents? I decided to wait and see what happened. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Plus, I had my own business to run and it was getting busier than ever. That's the thing that's so messed up about all this. While my parents were obsessing over Jess's fake success, my actual legitimate business was taking off. I had to hire a helper because I couldn't handle all the work myself. I was making more money than I ever had and none of it mattered to them because it wasn't a career with a fancy title and an office. So I just kept doing my thing, watching this weird situation with my sister unfold and secretly paying their mortgage. My buddy Mike was the only one who knew about any of this, and he thought I was insane for not just moving out and letting them deal with their own problems. Looking back, I probably should have listened to him. The real breaking point happened about a month ago. This is when everything started to completely fall apart, and honestly, I'm still processing all of it. I found out that my parents had been asking Jess for money. Not big amounts, just borrowing a couple 100 here and there for unexpected expenses. This whole time, I'm secretly covering their biggest bill and they're hitting up Jess for cash on the side. The worst part? She was giving it to them, or at least they thought she was. Mom let it slip that Jess had helped them out several times over the past year, but the way she described it was weird. Jess would promise to transfer the money, then there would be some issue with her bank. So she promised to send a check, which would never arrive. Then she'd claim she'd paid a bill directly for them, but they'd still get late notices. It was this crazy circle of excuses that somehow my parents kept believing, and the entire time they're telling me I need to get my financial act together. The irony was too much. I started wondering what would happen if I just stopped paying their mortgage. Would they finally have to face reality? Would they realize that Jess wasn't actually helping them? Or would they just lose the house and blame me somehow for not being successful enough to help them out? That's when I decided I needed to force the issue. I was tired of being the secret supporter, getting zero credit while Jess got praised for doing nothing. I was tired of my parents looking down on my legitimate successful business. Most of all, I was tired of feeling crazy for seeing what was so obviously happening right in front of them. So I made a plan and man, I had no idea how quickly everything would unravel once I set it in motion. It started just a few days later. I was in my workshop behind the house finishing up a custom cabinet for a client. A big job that needed my full focus. I was in the zone putting the final touches on it before delivery when my mom walked in unannounced. I could tell right away something was up. She stood there for a minute watching me work, then launched into this whole speech about how tough the economy is and how everyone is feeling the pinch right now. I just kept working thinking maybe she was finally going to admit they were having money problems, like actual honesty for once. Stupid me. Instead, She hit me with, "So your father and I have been talking and we think it would be good for you to start contributing to the household expenses. You know, paying rent while you're living here." I nearly ruined the cabinet I was working on. I had to put my tools down and take a breath because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd been paying their entire mortgage, $1,750 a month for 2 years, and now they wanted rent on top of that? I tried to stay calm and pointed out that I was 23, running my own successful business, and maybe instead of paying them rent, I should be saving for my own place. That's when she gave me this look, like I just slapped her or something. "We've supported you your whole life," she said, all dramatic. "And this is how you repay us, by refusing to help when we need it?" That's when I finally snapped. I asked her why she wasn't asking Jess for rent money. Jess, the golden child with her fancy corporate job and big city lifestyle. Why was it always me who had to step up? Mom's face changed real quick. She started stuttering about how Jess had real expenses and was building her career while I was just playing with wood. Then she dropped this bomb that Jess had loaned them money several times already, which I knew was total BS based on what I'd been seeing. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. The whole situation was so ridiculous that it was either laugh or punch a wall. This just made my mom even more pissed off and she went into full attack mode. "You've always been jealous of your sister's success," she said. "Maybe if you'd applied yourself in school instead of hanging around construction sites, you'd have made something of yourself too." I almost told her right then about the mortgage payments. The words were right there on the tip of my tongue. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride or maybe I just wanted to see how far they'd push this before reality finally hit them. So instead, I just said, "Fine. Ask Jess for the rent money. Let's see what happens." Mom stormed out and that's when the real nightmare began. The next few weeks were absolute hell. It was like my mom made it her personal mission to prove I was a loser who needed to get his act together. One day, she accidentally deleted some client emails from our shared family computer. These were actual job requests worth thousands of dollars. When I confronted her, she played dumb, saying she was just clearing out spam. Then our home internet suddenly stopped working. Super convenient timing, right? I manage all my business online, client communications, ordering supplies, sending invoices. Mom claimed it was technical issues, but I caught her on the phone with the provider literally canceling our service. Her excuse? "We need to cut unnecessary expenses." I had to use my phone data for a week until I could get a separate line installed in my workshop. The sabotage just kept escalating. She scheduled this ambush family intervention about my lack of direction in life. She invited my dad's brother, who's some corporate middle manager, to lecture me about wasting my potential. I actually had to leave halfway through to go give an estimate on a $155,000 deck renovation. The irony was completely lost on them. Through all this, my dad mostly stayed quiet. He'd occasionally back Mom up, but I could tell he was uncomfortable with how far she was taking it. One night, he actually came to my workshop and awkwardly tried to explain that Mom was just worried about my future. Meanwhile, Mom kept pushing the rent issue, leaving passive-aggressive notes about my share of bills on my door. It was completely surreal. I was literally paying for the roof over their heads while they were treating me like some freeloader. The final straw came when Mom went through my mail and opened a thank you card from a client. This lady was super happy with some built-ins I'd done for her home office and included a $200 cash tip. Mom took the money, just straight up took it. When I confronted her, she claimed it was to cover groceries I ate. That's when I knew I had to make some changes. I got a P.O. box the next day so she couldn't intercept my mail anymore. All this time, Jess was conveniently unreachable. She'd stopped answering family calls regularly, and when she did talk to our parents, it was always at some good time she scheduled in advance. Mom kept making excuses for her, saying she was swamped with her big project or traveling for work. I was just sitting there watching this whole show unfold, waiting for reality to finally catch up with everyone. Part of me felt bad knowing what was probably coming, but another part of me was just tired of being the only one living in the real world. The crazy thing is, while all this drama was happening, my business was doing better than ever. I'd landed several high-end contracts, including a complete built-in entertainment center for a doctor's home that was going to net me about $122,000. I was having to turn down jobs because I couldn't keep up with demand. I was even thinking about taking on a full-time employee, but none of that registered with my parents. To them, I was still just their disappointment son, playing with power tools in the garage. No matter what I accomplished, it would never measure up to Jess's fake corporate success. I started seriously thinking about moving out. I'd been putting it off because of the whole situation, but I was reaching my breaking point. I couldn't keep living under the same roof with people who had so little respect for me and what I'd built. Plus, I was worried about what would happen if I confronted them about the mortgage payments. Would they be grateful, embarrassed, angry that I deceived them? Knowing my parents, especially my mom, they'd somehow make me the bad guy. Even though I've been keeping them from foreclosure for years. I started looking at apartments just to see what was out there. Found a few places that would work, enough space for me to live, and maybe even a small workshop area. I could afford any of them easily, but something kept holding me back. Maybe it was worry about what would happen to my parents if I stopped paying their mortgage. Maybe it was just the hope that someday they'd see me for who I really was. All this crap was starting to mess with my head. I've always been the kind of guy who puts his head down and works through problems. When someone's being unreasonable, I usually just shrug it off and do my own thing. But this was different. This was my family actively trying to tear me down while I was literally keeping a roof over their heads. I started losing sleep, waking up at 3 in the morning, replaying my mom's manipulation, second-guessing if I was the problem for refusing to pay rent on top of the mortgage. Work suffered. I made careless mistakes, cut wood wrong, missed a client delivery, small screw-ups that proved I wasn't on my game. My buddy Mike noticed something was off when we were working on a big deck project together. He kept asking if I was okay, said I seemed somewhere else mentally. I finally broke down and told him everything. The mortgage payments, my parents' constant criticism, my mom's sabotage attempts, all of it. He was shocked. Jaw on the floor shocked. Dude, he said, this is seriously messed up. Why are you still living there? Why are you still paying their bills? They're treating you like garbage. I didn't really have a good answer. It was partly guilt, I guess. They're still my parents and the thought of them losing their house made me feel awful. But if I'm being honest, part of me was still hoping they'd eventually see me for who I really was. A successful guy who'd built something real, not the loser they thought I was. Mike told me I needed to either confront them about the mortgage or move out and let them deal with the consequences of their actions. He was right, but something in me still couldn't pull the trigger on either option. So I just kept living in this weird limbo, trying to avoid my mom's sabotage while running my business and secretly paying their bills. The situation at home just kept getting worse. Mom started cleaning my workshop without permission, which meant my tools would be put in random places or my project plans would go missing. Dad kept hitting me with these guilt trips about family responsibility and how I needed to contribute more. It was like living with people who completely refused to see reality. Mom even went as far as telling family friends that I was going through a rough patch and living at home until I got back on my feet. This got back to me when a family friend's son reached out offering me a job at his moving company. I had to awkwardly explain that I actually owned my own successful business and wasn't looking for work. The weirdest part, my parents saw all the trappings of my success, but somehow twisted them into negatives. When I bought a new truck for work, a necessary business expense, Mom commented that I was being flashy and should save my money. When clients called the house phone looking for me, Dad would ask if these were real jobs or just little fix-it projects. It was like they had this image of me as a failure and no amount of evidence could change it. Meanwhile, Jess remained the golden child despite all the red flags about her situation. Mom kept bringing her up constantly. Jess is working such long hours. Jess might get promoted to VP. Jess and Tom are looking at waterfront property. All while Jess herself was becoming increasingly scarce and evasive. I tried to block it all out and focus on my work. Started taking more jobs farther from home so I'd have an excuse to be gone most of the day. I kept my invoices and business paperwork locked in a fireproof safe that I bought after catching Mom snooping. I started backing up all my client contacts and project files to the cloud in case she accidentally deleted more emails. Basically, I was living like someone under siege in my own home. Every morning, I'd wake up wondering what new sabotage attempt I'd have to deal with that day. The situation reached a new level of crazy when I overheard my mom on the phone with one of her friends, talking about how worried she was about my financial irresponsibility and how I couldn't manage money. This from the woman whose mortgage I was secretly paying because she and Dad couldn't afford it. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a saw. Around this time, I also noticed my parents were getting more anxious about hearing from Jess. Mom called her almost daily, but Jess was picking up less and less. When she did talk to them, it was always brief and vague. Can't talk now. In a meeting. Super busy with this project. I'll call you next week. That kind of thing. I could see the worries starting to creep into Mom's eyes, though she'd never admit anything was wrong with her perfect daughter. Dad started making comments like, I wonder how Jess is really doing when Mom wasn't around. It was like they were finally starting to notice what had been obvious to me for months, but they couldn't quite admit it to themselves yet. Then came the day Mom tried to access my bank accounts. I'd left my laptop open while I went to grab lunch and came back to find her frantically clicking through my browser. She claimed she was just checking the weather, but I could see my bank's website in the recently closed tabs. That was it. The final straw. I couldn't keep living like this. I started making serious plans to move out, looking at apartments and storage options for my tools and materials. I found a decent place about 20 minutes away. Nothing fancy, but it had a small detached garage I could use as a workshop and enough space for me to live comfortably. I was ready to put down a deposit when everything imploded all at once. It was a Tuesday evening. I was in my workshop finishing up some paperwork when I heard my mom's phone ring. From her excited, "Hi honey," I knew she thought it was Jess. I didn't pay much attention until I heard her voice change from excitement to confusion, then to something like horror. I stepped closer to the door so I could hear better. Mom was talking to Tom, Jess's boyfriend. And from the sound of it, he was spilling every secret Jess had been keeping. That can't be right. Mom kept saying there must be some mistake and Jess would never do something like that. I couldn't hear Tom's side of the conversation, but I could tell from Mom's responses that he was painting a very different picture of Jess's life than the one she'd been showing us. When Mom finally hung up, she just sat there staring at her phone like she was in shock. Her hands were shaking. She looked up and saw me standing in the doorway watching her. "That was Tom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He and Jess broke up. He says Jess lost her job over a year ago. He says she's been lying to everyone." I didn't say anything. What could I say? "I told you so" seemed too cruel in that moment. Even after everything she'd put me through. He says she's been pretending to go to work every day, that she was fired for lying on her resume, that she's been maxing out credit cards to keep up appearances. That she's been Mom couldn't even finish the sentence. She started crying. I just stood there watching the house of cards finally collapse. All those suspicions I'd had for months were being confirmed and I felt no satisfaction at all. Just a weird mix of sadness for my sister and anger that it had taken this long for the truth to come out. Dad came home about an hour later and Mom broke the news to him. He didn't believe it at first. Kept saying Tom must be lying, that Jess would never do something like that. But even as he said it, I could see in his eyes that deep down, he knew it was true. All those little inconsistencies in Jess's stories suddenly made sense. They stayed up late that night trying to call Jess over and over. She never picked up. They left voicemail after voicemail, each one more desperate than the last. "Please call us back. We just want to know you're okay. Whatever's happening, we can figure it out together." I went to bed around midnight, leaving them still trying to reach her. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, I wondered if this would change anything between us. Would they finally see that I wasn't the family failure after all? Or would they somehow find a way to blame me for not warning them about Jess sooner? I didn't have to wonder long. The next morning, everything changed. I came downstairs to find my mom sitting at the kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes, eyes puffy from crying. Dad was pacing around the living room with his phone pressed to his ear, leaving what must have been his 20th voicemail for Jess. Neither of them acknowledged me at first. It was like they were in this bubble of shock and couldn't see anything outside of it. I made some coffee and sat down across from Mom, not really sure what to say. What do you say to someone whose entire worldview just got shattered? Finally, Mom looked up at me. Her face was different somehow. The usual judgment and disappointment were gone, replaced by something I'd rarely seen directed at me: desperation. "We need your help," she said simply. Just the naked truth that they were in trouble and I was their last resort. She started telling me about their financial situation. How Dad's pension wasn't what they expected. How medical bills had piled up after his knee surgery 2 years ago. How they've been barely treading water financially for years. "Jess has been helping us," she said, her voice cracking, or at least we thought she was. Turns out my parents had been asking Jess for money regularly over the past year. Small amounts at first, a couple 100 here and there for unexpected expenses, then larger sums when bigger bills came due. And Jess had supposedly been helping them, telling them she'd transferred money or paid bills directly. But now they were finding out none of that was true. The bills she claimed to have paid were still outstanding. The transfers she promised never arrived. It had all been a web of lies to maintain her image as the successful daughter while she was actually drowning in debt herself. "We're going to lose the house," Mom said, her voice hollow. "The retirement fund we've been using for the mortgage, it's empty. We got a notice from the bank yesterday. We're 3 months behind." I just stared at her trying to process what she was saying. 3 months behind? That wasn't possible. I've been making those payments religiously for 2 years. "That's not right," I said. "The mortgage is current. It's been paid every month." Mom looked confused. "How would you know that?" And there it was, the moment of truth I'd been both dreading and waiting for. I took a deep breath. "Because I've been paying it," I said, "for the past 2 years, every month, from my business account." The look on Mom's face was something I'll never forget. Complete and utter shock. Her mouth literally hung open. Dad, who had wandered back into the kitchen, dropped his phone. "What are you talking about?" Mom whispered. So I told them everything. How I'd overheard them worrying about losing the house 2 years ago. How I'd set up the automatic payments to look like they were coming from their retirement account. How I'd been silently keeping a roof over their heads while they continued to treat me like a failure. "Why didn't you tell us?" Dad asked, his voice uncharacteristically small. "Would you have accepted help from me?" I asked. "From your disappointment son with his hobby job? Or would you have been too proud to take money from someone you think is a loser?" They didn't have an answer for that. We all knew the truth. So all this time, Mom began then stopped. I could see her mentally calculating just how much money I'd paid, over $40,000 at this point. "Why did you do it?" she finally asked. "Because it's our family home," I said. "Because I didn't want you to lose it. Because despite everything, you're still my parents." Mom started crying again, but these weren't the same tears as before. These were complicated tears. "We had no idea you were." Dad trailed off. "Successful?" I filled in. "Yeah, I know. You've both made that very clear." The conversation that followed was tense and awkward. Mom kept saying how proud she was of me, how she'd always known I had potential. Dad talked about how impressed he was with my business sense, but neither of them actually apologized for how they treated me. Instead, they pivoted to talking about what we were going to do about Jess, how we needed to come together as a family to help her, how they knew I would want to help my sister when she finally turned up. It was surreal. Even after finding out I'd been financially supporting them for years while Jess had been lying to them, they still somehow saw her as the priority. It was like they were physically incapable of seeing me as equal to her, let alone acknowledging that I'd been the responsible one all along. I sat there listening to them talk about Jess's problems, about how we needed to be supportive when she came home, about how she was probably just overwhelmed by her high-pressure job. They were already making excuses for her, creating a narrative where she wasn't a liar, but a victim of circumstance. And me? I was still just the backup plan, the safety net, the one who would keep paying the bills while they focused all their emotional energy on Jess. That's when I realized nothing was ever going to change. I could pay their mortgage for 20 years, build $1 million business, win a craftsmanship award from the president, and I'd still be the second best child in their eyes. Jess could lie, cheat, and disappear, and they'd still make excuses for her. I told them I'd keep paying the mortgage for now because I didn't want them to lose the house, but I also told them things needed to change. I was done being the family punching bag. Done having my emails deleted and my mail opened. Done being lectured about responsibility by people who couldn't pay their own bills. They nodded and agreed to everything, but I could tell they weren't really hearing me. They were too caught up in the Jess drama, too worried about their golden child to really process what I was saying. Most of all, I felt trapped. I was still living under their roof, still paying their mortgage, still caught in this dysfunctional family dynamic, and I honestly didn't know how to break free. Jess finally surfaced 3 days later. She didn't come home, just called Mom, crying about how everything had fallen apart. She admitted to losing her job, to the credit card debt, to lying about her success, but she framed it all as something that had happened to her, not something she'd done. She was the victim of a toxic work environment and predatory lending practices, and my parents bought it hook, line, and sinker. Mom was on the phone with her for hours consoling her, telling her it would all be okay, that they understood. Dad started researching credit counseling services and talking about how they could help Jess get back on her feet. Meanwhile, no one mentioned the $40,000+ I'd contributed to keep us all housed. No one acknowledged that while Jess had been digging herself into a hole of lies and debt, I'd been building a legitimate business and supporting the family. It was like we were right back where we started, with Jess as the focus of everyone's concern and me as an afterthought. That's when I knew I had to get out. Not just physically move out of the house, but emotionally distance myself from this toxic dynamic. I needed to accept that my parents would never see me clearly, would never value what I'd built, would never put me on equal footing. With Jess the next day, after talking with Mike, who gave me a confidence boost, I found an apartment across town and put down a deposit. It had a small garage space that would work for my business until I could find a proper workshop. I moved out the following weekend while my parents were at a meeting with their bank. I didn't tell them beforehand. I knew they'd try to talk me out of it, make me feel guilty, or find some way to sabotage my plans. I left a note explaining that I'd make the mortgage payment for 1 more month to give them time to figure something out, but after that, they were on their own. I also left printouts of all the mortgage payments I'd made over the past 2 years, along with a breakdown of how much money I'd saved them. At the bottom, I wrote, "Now you know which child was actually successful. Don't contact me until you're ready to apologize for how you've treated me." The fallout was predictable. Mom called me 50 times, leaving tearful voicemails about how they didn't mean it, and how they'd always loved me, and how they were just trying to push me to reach my potential. Dad sent a text saying they were sorry if I felt unappreciated. The classic non-apology that puts the blame on me for my feelings rather than on them for their actions. Jess finally showed up at our parents' house a week after I moved out. According to family friends, she's telling everyone she had a nervous breakdown from working too hard and is taking time to reassess her priorities. She's completely rewritten the narrative so she's the victim instead of the liar. Classic Jess spinning her massive failure into some kind of noble journey of self-discovery. As for me, my business is booming. I hired my first full-time employee last month to help with the workload. I've got my own place where nobody can mess with my stuff or talk down to me. And for the first time in my life, I'm not carrying the weight of trying to prove myself to people who were determined to see me as a failure. So here I am, the family disappointment, doing just fine on my own. Turns out, being a disappointment is pretty damn liberating when you stop caring about disappointing people who never appreciated you anyway. If there's a lesson here, I guess it's this. Success isn't about the job title, or the college degree, or the fancy apartment. It's about building something real and sustainable. Whether that's a business, relationships, or just a life you don't have to lie about. By that measure, I was the successful one all along. They just couldn't see it until it was too late.